Welcome, everybody, to the Creator Tutorials podcast. Excited we have Gordon on today. Gordon, would you give yourself an introduction?
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me. I'm Gordon Firemark. They call me the podcast lawyer because I have spent the last 15 or 20 years helping podcasters and other creator businesses to do their deals and be safe and protect their businesses.
What was the story of how you got here today?
Well, I went to law school after studying radio, TV, and film in college and trying to get into film school and not succeeding at that. So law school, after working in Hollywood for a couple of years, the writers went on strike in 1988. And that's when I decided, okay, I will go to law school, and became an entertainment lawyer, working in theater, film, television, a little bit of music. And as the new technologies have come in over the last 20 years, I've been close to, if not at the forefront of those things. So I just love helping creative people working in that environment with that temperament, I guess you could say, and helping them to get their message out, make the impact, and achieve the influence that they really desire.
Tell me about the podcast. When did that start, and how's the journey been around that?
My podcast, Entertainment Law Update, began in 2009 when I had been a guest on a few shows, and I had been a recurring guest on a show about law and video. But when that podcaster decided to stop doing his show, I was hooked. I got the bug. So I went out and found a co-host and figured out the technology and launched that show. So that's going on, 14 and a half years now, and still going strong. One thing I've learned is just get started, start dirty, start ugly, and let it evolve with you. Nobody ever is perfect, really ever, but certainly not when we start out. And so it's better to get started, get your message out, and as Seth Godin said, just ship it and improve and iterate, and it will get better. And that's, never a safer time to start shipping things than when you only have a small audience and you make your mistakes and either nobody notices or they're compassionate and they understand. That's the practical lesson I'll give. On a business legal standpoint, I'll say I sort of have 4 pillars that I like to encourage creators to adopt. The first is to lay a really solid foundation as a business. You may not feel like you're in business. You may not want it to look like a business. You're in business. If you're making media content, there's risks, there's value in what you're doing, and you need to at least have thought about some kind of business structure like a corporation or a limited liability company, because when you get into doing shows with co-hosts or co-producers, you're going to become partners automatically, and that has legal ramifications. It's better to think it through and don't just go with the default. After that, you've got to have a team structure. If you're going to go, what they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You're going to need a team to help you build and grow and make the most of what you're doing. But you have to legally protect yourself in that arena as well, and make sure you have good contracts with everybody involved so that everybody owns what they think they own and doesn't own what they don't think. The third pillar is know your intellectual property rules, at least understanding the basics about copyright law. When you need to get permission for things, going and actually getting it. Don't rely on fair use, which is the whole thing. It is not as fair and it isn't as reliable as people seem to think. And then the fourth component is, as you start moving into monetization and turning this into a revenue stream, you got to, again, have good contracts, good understandings, clarity in all things. And that's sort of the framework for a solid establishment of a business. And then, of course, you got to get the customers, you got to get the clients, you got to get the audience. Oh, that's another one. Understand the difference between your audience and your customers, because oftentimes the audience isn't the intended customer.
Well, walk me through that a little bit more. What is the difference between the audience and the customer?
As a content creator, we are obviously interested in getting follows and likes and subscriptions to our channels and all those kinds of things. But those folks aren't the people who are paying you. I mean, if you're selling your own products and services, yes, but oftentimes in the sponsored advertising-driven arena, the advertiser is your customer. Or in the case of YouTube, YouTube is your customer because they are the ones that are paying you a share of advertising revenues and so on. So you've got to give them what they want, and that is viewers, yes, but it also has to be targeted. It also has to be a good fit for those advertisers. And so that's what I'm saying is the folks who want to reach your audience with a message aren't always also your audience.
I want to talk about, a lot of people become creators, maybe on accident, or they do it for a long time and it doesn't make them a lot of money. And then all of a sudden things start to happen and they start pulling in money as a creator. And maybe they have another business, a 9-to-5. At what point should people be starting to think this creator thing that I have is a real business and I should set it up as one?
Sooner than most people think. I think that's the real answer. I think the most common mistake that I see creators making is waiting too long to start thinking about it as a business, because either an opportunity comes along and you're not positioned to take advantage of it, or a liability comes along and you're not protected against that liability. And yeah, the risk is definitely there, even though we don't see it very often. And get started as early as you can.
So talk to me about this liability thing. What is liability? And maybe what are some of the common cases in the creator space where somebody would be liable for something?
Yeah, copyright infringement is number one on the list. If you use a person's music or even a snippet from someone else's show and you aren't in compliance with that fair use that I was talking about, that can mean tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of liability if they decide to sue you. Now, the reality is most of the time it's a DMCA takedown notice. Your content is taken down and that's the end of it. But that can be pretty embarrassing and even contractually damaging if you have a sponsor in your show, for example, and now you didn't give them the episode that they thought they were paying for. You're going to have to do at least a make good, but sometimes it's an actual breach of contract. You might have problems with a co-host or a guest on the show who hasn't signed a release and then later comes along and says, you took my words out of context, or you portrayed me in a negative light somehow, or just, I don't want to be on your show anymore, take it down. Those kinds of things can lead to legal actions as well. And then there's all those sponsor related things that if you don't deliver correctly, or if you over deliver and you don't follow the FTC regulations on advertising content and those kinds of things. That's the lions and tigers and bears of the content world.
I'm getting nervous now. We didn't sign a release before you came on. So,
Alex, I hereby grant you the permission to use my performance today in any and all media, whether now known or hereafter devised, throughout the universe in perpetuity.
Wow. Everybody write that down. That's great.
Come and get my full guest release. I make a release form available for podcast and channel hosts at podcastrelease.com. So folks get a free release.
That's amazing. Podcastrelease.com. We're going to put that in the comments. This is amazing for your resource for creators. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Any other type of freebies? That's like super generous. Like I'm going to be using that all the time. But any other resources you have out there for people?
Well, over at my website at gordonfiremark.com, I have something for the done for you, hiring a lawyer to do it for you. I've got something for the absolute do-it-yourselfer who just wants to find a legal form. We've got something called Easy Legal Templates for podcasters. And then there's an in-between where I actually sort of walk you through the what, the why, and the how, as well as providing the forms and templates. That's called Easy Legal for Podcasters, and it's a full online course. So I try to have something for folks at every level of things because, yeah, not everybody can or wants to hire a lawyer.
Wow, that is like huge for everybody listening to this podcast. It's great that you have alternatives because a lot of times creators don't have a lot of money, just to be frank. They're trying to build something and what they're making doesn't cover the cost of usually what they're spending.
Sometimes it's just that economic thing, and sometimes it's just our temperament as creators. We want to tinker. We want to get in there and understand how the machine works. And so being able to find that template and then, like I said, sort of get a little lesson on how copyright works or how that fair use thing works or how to license a piece of music, all those kinds of things. Because once you've learned it once, it's teach a man to fish and they're good to go forever. So,
yeah, no, really important concepts, I think, for people just to realize, because you can't be consulting a lawyer on every single thing that you're doing. So you need to have an understanding of the law for yourself.
That's my mission, is to make sure people have the information to make smart decisions and protect themselves.
Well, what's your aspirations with the podcast or with the business? You're a great entrepreneur and you've developed these kind of other types of products a lot of lawyers don't create. So what's on the horizon for Gordon, or what's kind of the podcast dream or the business dream?
Total world domination, of course.
Right. Contractually, yeah.
Like I said, helping others, helping creators get their message out, achieve that impact, have some influence. I really believe in the butterfly effect. One small thing that you do here today, you touch one person with your message, that's going to have a ripple effect that will go around the world, and hopefully the place gets better and better rather than the trajectory we seem to have been on for a while. So go out and do good stuff and be good.
Well, I think you're unique in the way, too, that you're a lawyer who's producing content. You don't see a lot of lawyers doing that. So talk to me about how has content supported you in your legal business? How has that helped?
Well, most lawyers market by generating fear or, reaching out through referrals and things like that. And that is definitely a part of how my practice operates, the referral business. But for me, providing good information, being known as a resource and an expert in my field is really great. So when I started, my content strategy started with a blog before blogging was a thing. I had a database back website that I tinkered and built myself. And then when I discovered podcasting, Leo Laporte, thank you very much. When he went into the podcasting arena, I thought, oh, that's cool. I could totally do that. And that became my main content strategy. And then I got into doing YouTube video as well. And really, it's just about being visible and positioned as the expert. And I think that's the power of the digital media, is just that, being able to get the stuff out. And that's the way I try to change the world, one life at a time.
And just got to get maybe specific here for the lawyers who don't see content or social media maybe as a way that they can grow their business. Has it led to a lot of business? Has it been a great kind of marketing method for you? Or do you find it a lot of your customers through other means?
No, I would say that most of my new business coming in knows of me through my digital media. And even if they have been referred to me by someone else, the first thing you do when you get a referral, right, you go Google that person's name. And so it pays to be out there and highly visible. So having a lot of content on the web where your name is front and center is a visibility tool for that too. So everybody comes in knowing a little something about me.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, people, first thing they do, right, Google you and then look at the content. And a lot of it is video-based content, and your social media presence has a direct reflection on people's perception of your business, right? If you have a podcast and you have one of them up there, or you have no social media following, or you have a tiny social media following, you know, like, what does that say about your business, right? As opposed to somebody like you who's developed a huge podcast over a number of years and is out there doing all these, not that you're the biggest creator of all time, but
yeah, it is a little bit of threading the needle, you know, because you do have to focus on your core business. But with as much time and energy as I put into content creation, and by the way, I've got a lot of streamlined systems and some helpers behind the scenes and those kinds of things. But the point is, pick and choose, find a couple of platforms and go all in on that. Go big or go home, as they say. But I don't think you have to be on all the platforms all the time.
Well, which platforms do you find that you have the most success on online?
So my podcast platform is pretty strong. So YouTube has evolved into a podcasting platform these days. And my other show, the newer one, which is for creators, is doing very well for me. That's called Legit Podcast Pro. And that's going real well for me. And then I think Facebook is still my biggest tractor. It just seems to be where a lot of podcasters are hanging out.
Tell me about you said it was what was it, Pro? Podcast
Legit Podcast Pro.
Legit Podcast Pro. And what's that podcast about?
Each week I do about a 10-minute video live stream audio podcast as I talk about some legal or business issue in the podcasting space. I talked a week or two ago about the need for a succession plan. What happens to your stuff after you're gone or disabled or something like that? Talk about the need for the podcast prenup, that agreement between the co-hosts that I've talked about before. Those kinds of topics.
Very interesting. Any kind of unique situations that come to mind as far as really kind of out there or weird things that you can disclose, obviously?
Well, there's a couple. You know, one of the stories from my own practice is a guy who had built his own podcast network. He had 6 or 8 or 10 shows, and over the course of, and one of these shows was a very popular TV show, recap show. And he, over the course of several seasons, brought in a co-host or two, finally sort of settled on one. And over time, that co-host ended up becoming sort of more the primary voice on that podcast. And when the two guys got into a little bit of a disagreement over how they were going to monetize, one wanted to go Patreon, one wanted to go ad-supported. They had a disagreement, and the founder of the network, or creator of the show, at some point in an email or text message said to the other, hey, it's your show, we'll do it your way. Well, that was interpreted as, you own it, it's yours, take it and do what you want with it. And the co-host took it and shut down access for the host of the show, moved it to a new network, all of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And just simple things like a little text message, just trying to be the good guy and take the high road. And it ends up costing him the show, really. And we ended up, having a year-long battle. Instead of monetizing the show, they had this fight and got to pay lawyers and all that. So just be careful how you talk about things.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I try to do a lot of partnerships with people, but once money gets involved, it gets hard. I call it like co-parenting. Nobody likes to co-parent. And then when you get money involved, it gets really, really complicated, right? Relationships, even good relationships, can stray once money gets involved.
That's one of the things to really be careful about, is using words like partnership when what you mean is just a quickie deal, a one-off situation, because partnership implies co-ownership of the whole venture.
Wow.
So doing a collaborative episode together is not a partnership, it's a collaborative episode. And so being as clear and articulate about those kinds of things is probably the easiest way to protect yourself against those sort of unforeseen friction points.
Wow. I've called things kind of, off the cuff. Oh, let's do a partnership. Let's partner on this. And
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start rearranging my language on that.
Well, the business community doesn't help when they talk about brand partnerships and co-everything and joint ventures and things. And, these terms actually do have legal meaning. So it's something that you need to be a little careful about.
Wow. Well, I've learned a ton on this podcast, Gordon. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I'm really excited to dive into all the free resources that you have out there. But tell us again, how do we find those resources? How do we connect with you? How do we reach out if we have a legal question around, our creator business?
The best place to find me is gordonfiremark.com. That's got sort of all my different levels of stuff that I talked about. And you can find me, and there's a contact form and those kinds of things. And I'd be happy to chat with people who have questions or needs.
Excellent. Thanks for making yourself available to people. I will put that information down below this video just to make it easy for everybody. But Gordon, thank you so much for your time. We'll have to have you back here in the future.
It's been great being with you, Alex. Thanks.